Hi everyone. Today we are proud to present Saravanan, who is a student from Cornell, a former student from IISc as well, who is with Professor Arnab when he was here. So he will answer one of the basic questions in all of causality. Does X cause Y or does Y cause X? Or is there a confounder between the two? And what is the sample complexity of getting the same? So this is one of the most basic questions in causality, which surprisingly has not been answered to full satisfaction until now. So thanks to Saravanan for joining us at IISc to present his work. So a brief bio about Saravanan. Saravanan is a PhD student at Cornell University, supervised by Professor Jayadev Acharya. He specializes in causal inference and high dimensional probability and statistics. During his PhD, he has been exploring problems related to causal discovery, causal identification, and he has a keen interest in understanding the sample complexity. Prior to this, he obtained his master's from IISc with Professor Arnab. So, without further ado, I'll hand it over to him.
Thank you for the great description of the problem. First of all, that was perfect. Thank you very much, Rahul. So I'm here to present this work, sample complexity distribution cost from effect, and this is joint work with Arnab, Jaydev, Saurav, and Ziteng. The first thing I wanted to discuss is however, it is very surprising that during 1950s or so, people didn't know about this, and they were like debating amongst each other. For example, Fisher was the one who came up with this theory that there could be some hidden gene, or there could be some vitamin A deficiency in birth. That could be the reason for people to smoke, and that could be the same because of the same reason people also receive cancer. And like these kind of philosophical arguments, like how can we prove? And it is indeed very hard to prove. And like in this specific example, we cannot. The way to find this is to force people to smoke and then see whether they get cancer or not, or force people to not smoke at all, and then like do a randomized control trial, and then we will be able to know. Like with the example, we will be able to know. But that was unethical. So two people started this experiment, Richard Doyle and Sir Bradford Hill. And these two people started this experiment in 1950, where they collected a group of doctors as their trials. And what they did was they were basically analyzing their smoking habits for a period of 40 to 50 years. So this was a very extensive research, and there were like so many papers. And finally, with many papers and with multiple research, at the end, after 50 years or so, they came to conclusion that it does cause. But it took a lot of effort because we cannot intervene. I mean, like we cannot prove it in the sense that like there are multiple arguments. I mean, there is a series. Like I do not know. I haven't read most like many of the papers, but based on from what I read, there is a series of work it spans over 40 years, 45 years, and eventually it convinces us. Right. Based on some assumptions, natural assumptions. Correct. I agree. It is not proof, but it is a convincing argument based on all of this research. Sure. It convinces the majority. Yeah, the scientific community. Sure. Like, yeah, one cannot prove it without further assumptions, but once you make the assumptions, then sure, we can prove it. And those assumptions they have to be convincing. So this was the story. And uh, in this work, I'll be presenting something more here. What if we have interventions? Whether we will be able to distinguish between these three graphs. These three graphs, in the sense, more formally, This is Reichenbach's common cause principle. It says that when two random variables are correlated, there is either a causation from one to another, or there is a common confounder that causes both these variables. And with this principle, we define this. I mean, like, this is the definition of bivariate causal model. Here, if x causes y, then x takes its value from an independent noise nx, and y takes its value based on x as well as some its own independent noise. So this fy is a deterministic function, and these noises are all independent. Similarly, for y causes x, one can define it the same way. And if u causes both x and y, then like u takes its value from its independent noise, and x and y depends on its own independent noise along with u. The definition is clear, right? These functions are deterministic. The only randomness are these noises. Yeah.
At this stage,
Yeah, for this definition, we don't really need to specify what the noise is, but yeah, you can make assumptions, and yeah, that helps. And now I will like, this is the intervention. Intervention in the sense we, for example, setting x to a fixed value, small x. What does it mean? It basically changes this function to a constant, which is small x. Or like in this case, x would be like a constant again. And then the rest of the model remains the same. And yes, that is how it works, intervention works. And we generally, this is a classical notation, do. So do of x equal to x is what I will use as intervention. Please feel free to stop at any point in case if I'm going faster. So like
data for that.
yeah, not for this talk. Like those are also like one can define intervention that way, but for this talk it's hard intervention. Yeah, we are forcefully fixing it to a particular. Yeah. Yeah.
Then why?
Okay. No, if x is 2, then y is like y it uses this function to compute its value. N sub x is like the noise independent to x. It's a private randomness. Nx is some random variable.
The picture only of the x to y.
Correct. So that means y depends on x, right? So if you look at this function, x is an argument. So y depends on x. Correct. Is that clear?
So what it ends the bench, right?
So n sub x is like some noise. It could be a Gaussian noise, for example. It's something, some randomness. That's it.
They're independent noises, nx and ny.
Nx and ny are independent, yeah. For example, like there is a noise here and there is another noise here, something like that. And these two noises are independent, they are not correlated. Yeah. Correct. Not getting your question actually.
She's asking whether it's based on.
No, I mean like then we need to define what a causation is, and only then we can define intervention, right? I mean like we need this notion of causation, and only then intervention makes sense. Yeah, this is causal-based network. I mean like what I understand, both are the same. Yeah, SEMs and yeah, causal-based network both are the same.
He's asking whether the can give x, y random variable. Okay.
But we need like this notion, right? I mean, y depends on x. For that, like we need something. Only then intervention makes sense. Okay, anyway, this is the definition that we are following here. Maybe we can discuss it offline.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, that is that we can't call that.
I mean, it can be, yeah, there can be a cycle, but yeah, they're hard to deal with, and generally we assume that the models are like acyclic. And yeah, this is only two variables, so it becomes easier as well. But yeah, we can have another arrow, but cyclic models, yeah, if we don't really deal with them. Yeah, so like for example, x equal to x means like instead of this function, this will be a constant, x equal to x, and the rest of the model remains the same. So what happens to y? Y is like the probability of y will be different, right? P of y will be different from what's happening naturally, right?
Like in like capital X equal to NX.
So it's some Bernoulli, you can, yeah. It's either people who smoke or does not smoke. Yeah, I mean, like, for example, if 10% of the people are smokers, then this is like 0.1, right? Bernoulli 0.1, something like that. Okay, and it should be 0.9. So, like, without assumptions, it's very clear that we cannot distinguish these three graphs because, as Hyogo pointed out, it's hard. But if we have some assumptions, then in the last couple of decades, people have looked at this question with some side information. We will be able to like distinguish between these three graphs. But in this work, what we focus on is like we assume that we are allowed to like take samples from interventional distributions. And the question is how many interventional samples are required? Or in other sense, what is the trade-off, asymptotic trade-off between observational and interventional samples? So if we have more observational samples, do we really need more interventional samples or does it decrease or does it like, what is the balance between these two? That is the motivation behind this work. And so like this is the problem statement for I mean, like asymptotically, it's like if this is growing n square, okay, k square, yeah, O of k square. I mean, it's not the exact number, but so this is the problem statement, problem setup. Where correct, correct, but we need to like know exactly what the trade-off is. It sometimes is a constant. It sometimes is some function that decreases. So exactly what is the hard criteria? We need to understand that in different regimes. There are regimes and phase transitions. We'll come to that. It'll be clear soon. So we have these two random variables x and y bivariate model over discrete setting we are looking at over alphabet of size k. And we need to define correlation somehow. And this is our notion of correlation that we have defined. So essentially what this means is that it's the DTV distance between the joint and the product of marginals. So this is like the product and this is the joint. And this is the TV distance between these two. And it turns out that this is also equivalent to this because like you can take x outside and p of x outside and so this is essentially the average TV distance between p of y and p of y given x or the average TV distance between p of x and p of x given y. So we assume that this is at least epsilon, meaning they are epsilon TV correlated because we call it. So under this assumption that x and y are correlated, we need to find which one of those three graphs is the correct one. The hypothesis is that the actual correct graph is one among these three. Assuming that it's one among these three, then we need to distinguish. That is the goal. We'll see soon now. So as I said, we have both samples.
Not in
Yes, if they are less than epsilon, then we need to find an epsilon that is, or yeah, sure. Or we can assume that they are independent if it's too small, correct? Okay, so this is the problem statement. Suppose that X and Y are correlated, TV correlated. That's the first statement. And assume that we have MO, O for observational, and MI for interventional. MO number of observational samples and MI number of interventional samples. So an algorithm solves this problem if and only if we are able to identify the correct graph using these many samples. Then we solve CSI. So this is the definition. And as I said, this is what we are looking at. What is the trade-off? And the trade-off is, this is the trade-off. X-axis is the observational samples and Y-axis is the interventional samples. And yeah, sure. You can boost it using median. Yeah. There will be a log 1 over delta. So like we have 4 regimes here. So when we have 0 observational samples, we need k to the 2 by 3. So note that this is case the size, alphabet size, domain size, and note that this is sublinear in K also. So we need only sublinear number of samples from interventions. And till observations reach this is a constant. There is like no change, and this is tight. The bold is like for tightness. And once it reaches here till K, we have this nice curve, and this is also tight. After that, it's a flat line, and this is like we don't know the tightness, but we know that we know the upper bound here. And then after the K square over epsilon square, we have 1 over epsilon. Yeah.
I think this graph also sort of answers the earlier question that purely using observational samples, to X causes Y or Y causes X.
Right. That's right.
And you always need certain number of
Unless we make additional assumption or we have some other side information. Unless we know something else. Yeah. Yeah. Like there's like done a lot of research in the last 2 decades, especially last decade or so. Yeah. Okay, so we'll be looking at this second regime because this is also interesting. The graph is nice, and also the proofs are like pretty similar for other regimes. There are some minor tricks required. So the first thing we will do is the algorithm, and then later we will look at the hardness. Okay, and this is how like this is what we require. Like if X causes Y, then what is Px of Y? Px of Y, I'm sorry, I forgot to. So this is basically do X. We shorten it, and yeah, this is also standard notation. This is clear, right? Yeah.
intervention does not depend on K.
That's like only here. This is more interesting because these are constants. Like everything else is constant, and this is where like, I mean, this we believe that this transition has to be smooth. We don't know exactly what it is, but this is like a nice transition, right? These are constants, right? Constants in the sense like, yeah, it's flat. It is tied up to logarithmic factors. Yeah. And why is this interesting? Because yeah, I mean, like look at this, right? Square root of m observational. This is also like pretty similar bound to closeness testing, which we will see soon. Okay. So the first statement is clear, right? If X causes Y, then it is conditional. They both are not same if X does not cause Y, right? For example. So this is the distinction that we will be using. So the algorithm is pretty simple. So like, assume that you found an X And that for that x, if these two are far, then we can use closeness testing, which is a very standard well-known problem. And we can use the closeness testing result and we will be able to answer this question, right? As long as we find such an x, that is a good x, then we are good. Good in the sense for that x, the conditional and marginal are far in TV distance. Then we are doing great. But finding this x is a bit tricky. Before getting into this, determining x, we'll first look at the closeness testing. We'll revisit the closeness testing problem and then we'll go back to finding how to find good x. So this is the closeness testing problem where we have two unknown distributions, P and Q.
So, sorry, I'm
No worries.
So,
Yeah.
if x causes y, uh, third case, so that's the thing I'm trying to get to. So, if u causes both x and y, in that case, will it follow similar to?
Yes, so like the structure is that like first you determine whether x causes y or not. If that is the case, you know. If that is not the case, then you know that x does not cause y. Then you determine whether y causes x. If not, if both of them are not true, then it is u that causes. That's the sorry. That's a good question. Yeah, so we have these two distributions P and Q, and we get samples from both P and Q. And the question is this: we draw NP samples from P, and we have NQ samples from Q. And then like to distinguish between P equal to Q versus P TTV P comma Q greater than alpha, we will require these many samples. And this is a well-known result. People studied and like this was like optimized even up to the error parameter. This is like perfect. We know this like this is tight also. And we can use this result to see whether the marginal and interventional are far or not. So alpha is the accuracy. The distance between P and Q. So like in our case, P is P of y, right? And Q is intervention. And like this is the graph that we have, but note that like there's a difference. Here it is alpha, here it is epsilon. So we need like in terms of epsilon, not in terms of alpha. So we need to somehow relate that. And also note that like here also it scales inversely, square root of NP, right? And we have like similar here as well. Yeah.
I was reading alpha as epsilon. Since alpha is an input to the tester, can just not give epsilon?
Yeah, I mean, like, so you're right, but like if you look at this algorithm, like we define this as far apart. How far we'll get in there soon. Yeah, alpha is not like alpha is something like how far are these two? It could be epsilon, it could be slightly small, it could be slightly big. Yeah, we'll get this very soon. Anyway, like now I'll give the intuition. That's exactly what you asked. For that, I'll give the intuition. Like we know that they are two variables are TV correlated, right? So like either that there will be some excess, like just for assume that for all x's these two are true, and either it is here or here, right? And this is uninformative, right? Because the conditional and marginal are far. So like with these x's, these are bad x's. We don't want these x's. We need good x's. These are good x's, right? Because we have some information here. For this x, the conditional and marginal are far. So all that we need to verify is whether interventional and marginal are far or not. If they are far, then we know that it's x is causing y.
So this test for 0 or greater than it.
No, this is just for intuition I'm giving you. Sure, there could be in between, yeah. No, just to give an intuition, I'm telling that this is not even 0. It could be close to 0. Just to give the intuition, these are like uninformative. These are bad x's. We don't want them. But these kind of x's are good x's. Just to convey that information, I'm giving you this example. Sure, it could be anything. Correct. It could be one x or Correct. That's right. But how do we find that x efficiently is the question that I'm coming. Like we don't want to sample every x, right? Because that's like super linear already. So like for example here, like we know that it's tau. Tau is greater than epsilon. But in order to like sample such an x, it requires epsilon over tau. Many like samples from x, p of x. So like what other thing that we can do? Also tau is something we really don't know. That problem is also there. So what else can we do? So like we know that like these two are far. That's all we know. Like the average distance between these two are far. And the naive attempt, as I said, if we sample every k, every x, then it's like super linear already. But we can do some slightly better. What we can do is we can sample 1 over epsilon many x's. And among that, we will be able to get one good x. And this approach requires these many samples, right? Of 1 over epsilon samples. Because of this result. Just because of this result, we can take 1 over epsilon samples, but even that is not going to be basic. So
Yes.
yeah.
Just to understand the second part, is the probability of the sampling x for the sampling distribution of
Very sorry.
the probability that it's a
Correct.
the probability is over the sample x.
Over the sample x, correct. From p of x.
This is going to be sufficiently
Correct. There are like 2 epsilon over 2. So we will require like, we need like 1 over epsilon square of total samples. Because like there's 1 over epsilon for this and 1 over epsilon for this. Basically. Yeah.
Assume access to PFX. You know,
No, we don't know, but it is p of x, right? We don't know p of x. Yeah, exactly, but it's like epsilon probability. We have this guaranteed. So with in expectation with 1 over epsilon samples, we will be getting one of the good x's, right? That's the idea. As long as it's highly probable in the sense, then we should be able to like get that event. Correct. P of x is observational, correct. I mean, like we will be using intervention here, but just for analysis, we are using conditional. Like, well, we actually.
the same.
No, we have sample access to p of x. We have sample access to p of x. We just don't know p of x. Okay, cool. So, like, I mean, from now on, I will use this definition for dTV. Okay, this TV distance. I will use this q of x. So the TV correlation is the expectation over q of x. So this we will use for a few slides. Okay. So like just going to prove this inequality like that we just saw, and it's not hard. Like we just need to like split this into 2 parts, with q of x greater than epsilon over 2 and q of x less than epsilon over 2. And this is at most epsilon over 2. This is at most 1. So this is total is at most epsilon over 2. Also, we know that the expectation of q of x is at least epsilon because this is a TV correlation. So we can combine these two and we get this. And like also like we can use this is like at most 1 because q is TV distance. So therefore this is at least epsilon over 2. The proof is simple. And like yeah, sure, but this requires an additional 1 over epsilon factor. So we will this requires 1 over epsilon square. So that's we can show something better. That's what we are going to do in the next few slides. Yeah.
Right. Overview what you have done. Sampled x.
Yeah.
1 over epsilon samples as per the distribution of x.
Yes.
Then the analysis showed that Yeah, if they are far apart, you will be able to distinguish.
Correct. But also like the TV distance is at least epsilon over 2. So we need like another 1 over epsilon samples to get that event, whatever that is. So it's like 1 over epsilon square, right? No, this is just analysis, right? Finding such an X. Once you find such an X, then you intervene and then compare intervention versus marginal. That's the algorithm. This is just for analysis. Like if X is good, then what? Like how do we find it? For that analysis, we need to compare intervention and conditional and marginal, right? Once you find such an X, then you need to do intervention and that's how your algorithm works. But this is just for analysis. I mean, like that's like the work done. So because this probability is at least epsilon over 2. So to get like one sample from that, it's like, I mean, basically we are using that it's inversely proportional. So it's like another one. It's like the work because we need to verify whether it is a good X or not, right? Yeah. Because it's TV distance, right? So this is at most 1 no matter what. It's average over TV distance. So it's at most 1. Correct. And there is a greater than or equal to, and this is this probability, right? This is like upper bounded by 1. No, right? Yeah. Okay, sure. Okay, sure. So now we will look at like something called Levin's strategy. And Levin's investment strategy, we can use it here to get a better bound. And this uses a geometric series. Let me see that. So D is some probability distribution, and this is our P of X. We will compare both the worlds. And Q is some function which maps from support of D to real number between 0 and 1. And you can think of this as the TV distance, which is the Q of X function we just defined, right? And Q is unknown, right? And we know that expected value of Q of X is at least epsilon. This is the TV correlation. And also, like we know that this is the work. The work you can think of them as in interventional samples. And this is inversely proportional to TV distance, right? This is where the 1 over epsilon that you asked is coming from. Because if TV distance is large, then we need like less work. But if TV distance is very small, then we need more work. So that is why it is inversely proportional. And once we have all of these, then we have the sufficiency for Levin's strategy to work out. We'll see that. So the goal is to find this X, good X, by minimizing the work done. And this is the idea. This is Levin's idea. So this is something we already discussed. And this is Levin's idea. So you take L to be log 2 over epsilon. And for there exists some J within 1 to L such that this is true. And the point to note is that like in our previous attempt, we had this as constant, right? We had this as epsilon. But here it is variable. It varies over J. So when J is very small, then this is high, this is large. But this will be small. And when J increases, this decreases, but this increases. So it's like a balance, and it's like more of an iterative approach. And yeah, this is basically the key point here. And through this, we will be able to like minimize the 1 over epsilon factor here. So like, for example, like I'm just going through the work required here, right? So the strategy is like for every J, we take these many samples, L over 2 to the J epsilon. And for everything, we need to invest 2 to the, it's 1 over this, right? The work. So for each one of those samples, we need to invest 2 to the J as work. So the total work done is L square over epsilon. And that is like 1 over epsilon. So ignore the logarithmic factors. Okay, so this is like comparing, like directly comparing the work, but the actual algorithm is as follows. So like we will take these many samples from P of X, and then for each set sample in the jth batch, we do this. We will test with 2 to the minus j as accuracy. When j is 1, this is like 1 by 2. When j is 2, this is 1 by 4, but when j is log 2 over epsilon, then this will be like epsilon over 2. Yeah. Pardon? I mean, like it has to be inversely proportional. For example, here it is 2 to the minus j, right? And you remember in our sample complexity, we had 1 over epsilon square. So it's like they're inversely proportional, right? And this is like the epsilon or alpha, as you asked. It was alpha, right, in closeness testing. Instead of alpha, we use this 2 to the minus j. I mean, we use alpha as 2 to the minus j. And this, when j is small, then this is high, this is large. And when j is large, then this is small, but it doesn't go below epsilon. Levin's correct. Correct. Yeah, exactly. I mean, like only that makes sense, right? Also. It is efficient. I don't remember the time. Yeah, it is efficient. Pardon? It is efficient, yeah. And yeah, when we calculate the total number of interventional samples, it comes down to this. That is it. So this is the algorithmic part. Is that clear? So next, correct. Yeah. For every sample, we just test closeness, but this parameter is it varies with respect to J. And because of this geometric series, we are able to minimize that 1 over epsilon. Okay, so now I'll be like, yeah, discussing the hardness results, and then we will conclude. So the hardness result says that for this is for closeness testing. So as I said, it is tight. So with respect to alpha square, this bound is tight, and the idea is as follows. So they have like two distributions P and Q, and defined as follows. And these are supposedly hard distributions. And using these two distributions, they show an adversarial argument that distinguishes between P comma P and P comma Q. P comma P meaning they both are equal, and P comma Q is like they both are different. So we need like, yeah, we can show that we need like these many number of N Q samples from Q. That's the. Oh, okay, so A and B are two disjoint sets. And yeah, if the element is from A, then this would be the probability. If it is from B, then this would be the probability. Pardon? Yeah, I mean, like generally, like this K is large, so like this is small. This is like, yeah, this is pretty high, but A's size is smaller. So heavy in the sense like the mass. Yeah. Pardon? For Z is some plus or minus based on if the support is even, I think Z is +1, otherwise Z is -1. Yeah. Correct, exactly. No, these are the same. Like the only difference is here with respect to these elements. So P and Q are pretty close. The only thing is we have like this as an extra factor for a large number of elements, but these are like lightweight. No, it is not uniform, right? Because like for A it is uniform, but here, yeah, it is uniform within B, but it's not the same. Like it is 1 over 4K, but yeah, it's not the same.
Sign a different. That is it.
Correct. Correct. And it is a constant probability. So this is their idea, but for causal models, we have multiple distributions here. Yeah, go ahead. Yes, P is a distribution. If you sum it up, then you will get 3 by 4 plus 1 by 4, I guess. Yeah, it does sum to 1. No, because of the plus or minus. It's, I mean, like if you have like for even support, you have plus 1 plus alpha, and for odd support, you have 1 minus alpha. So when you add, it's like, yeah, they cancel out. And Z is either plus 1 or minus 1, depending on whether the support is even or odd. That is how they define it. No, both does add to 1 because Z is plus or minus 1. For even support, it is plus 1, and for odd support, it is minus 1. So if you collect the pairs of elements, they cancel out. That is how they construct it. Okay, so like for causal models, we have like multiple distributions, right? So we need like a slightly different definition. So what we do is we construct hard SCMs instead of hard distributions, and we show this as our lower bound, which is essentially the same bound we had. And the technique is pretty simple. Assume that X is a Bernoulli variable, and like we have like Q and Q minus for conditionals. And because X is Bernoulli, we need only 2 conditionals. And we have 3 distributions P, which is like the same like before. Q is this one, and the Q minus is this one. And I'm not sure whether Z is necessary here or not because you already split into plus alpha and minus alpha. But if you combine these two, then you get P, right? If you add Q and Q minus, then you get P. So the marginal is P. Does that make sense? The marginal is P, and the conditionals are Q and Q minus. And then we can use similar argument to distinguish QQ minus PP and QQ minus QQ minus. And the first 2 are conditionals, Q, which are the same. And the second 2 are interventionals. And they can be marginal or conditional depending on the graph. So very similar argument as theirs. It uses Valiant's lemma, wishful thinking lemma. And using that, we will be able to distinguish. That's the idea. So now we have a lower bound. The only part that is missing is this third part. Yeah, so we have like these 4 tuples, right? Like this 4 tuple is like, we have 4 distributions. No, either like this is the case or this is the case. And if the samples come from this, we need like these many samples. Or if it comes from this, basically like otherwise you can't distinguish between these 2. That's how the argument works. Every set of set B is varying between P and
Every element from set B is varying between P and this time.
for every B, it doesn't vary. For odd B, it is 1 by 4k into 1 plus alpha. But for even it is 1 minus alpha. Between P and Q, yeah, they are different. That's right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, by this definition, yeah, that is right. Only one element. I'm not sure which is hard because, like, I don't know. Maybe it is. I don't think that works. But I mean, any instance can be hard, and this is a hard instance. That's all we need, right? Correct. And we like this is not really technical because we are like basically using the same type of analysis, but for 4 tuples. So yeah, we need to like prove that it works for here. It works here as well. And instead of Bernoulli, if you have more distributions, then this would be like 8 tuple or something like that, 6 tuple. so on. So
that
yes, but the constant, I think it's like a tower. See, it's pretty big. So even for this, the constant was like pretty big. If it's like 10 or something, then it's like big tower. So I don't know. Yeah, but proof works that way. Okay, so like this part we haven't really, we don't know the answer here. All that we are using is we are using the same algorithm and we get this root k over epsilon square. Instead, like what we can do is like we can use samples from this conditional, which we have never done so far. We take samples from marginals and we take samples from interventions, and that's what we were doing so far. So instead, what we can do is like we can ask this question, whether like px of y is equal to p of y or px of y is like equal to p of y given x. So there are like three samples, right? I mean, like one sample is from intervention, one sample is from conditional, and another sample is from marginal. So if we can compare, like if we can solve this problem, then we believe that that would give a nice smooth transition here. But we don't know the answer for the to this classification question. You can also call it three sample testing. This is like, yeah, we need to work on this.
X and Y. In that case, would it still fall into this graph? Which does
Yeah, it will fall into this one, right? Px of y is equal to p of y in that case. I mean, like we will do both sides. Px of y will do, and that will be p of y. You also will do py of x, and that would be like p of x. That would be it. Correct.
and like how do you test? Like you first you test you pulse X.
No. Like we can't intervene on u because u is hidden. We can intervene only on x or y. Yeah, we need to decide whether x causes y or not. Otherwise, y causes x. If both are not, then it is the third. That's how. Okay, yeah, this is why one thing that, yeah, that's very interesting. So like it is like we can add up everything, right? It's 3 times, 2 times. Which one? This one? No. This is the first. We defined this correlation, right? So yeah, this is the first. No, we didn't know as far as, yeah, in terms of sample wise, yeah, we didn't know before. Uh yeah, I mean, like there is one work where which doesn't even use interventional samples, but they assume that the entropy is high for an observable, and using that with some assumption, they are able to. That's a strange. This is, yeah, line of work.
And at some point, it's naive algorithm that uses 1/epsilon square sample.
Right.
And that's on the right side of the.
No, that is different. We were only looking at this regime for the proof, and this uses simple hypothesis testing. We can use simple hypothesis testing, and that requires 1 over epsilon square samples. So we defined this notion of correlation, and we showed the trade-offs, and some of them were tight. The future work are like we need to implement this on real data, and also we need to smoothen this phase transition over the third regime especially. And also we need to like define this for more general graphs, which is, for example, the first and third graph, x causes y along with u causing x and y. We can combine both of them, and that is also a graph, but we don't have that in this in this framework. So we need to include them and see how to proceed. Yeah, also like extending it for like a larger graph, that is also correct.
How about like all these sample concepts? Do they apply after a certain threshold? You didn't mention in such. I'm wondering whether you need a certain minimum number of samples before.
Yeah, but No, I mean, like we have this trade-off, right? If observation is 0, still you need k to the 2 by 3 by epsilon to the 4 by 3, right? Yeah, if we have the minimum, right? Even if this is 0, this is the minimum. I mean, the minimum is 1 over epsilon square that we definitely need. But on the other hand, yeah. Correct. Yeah. A good question. That's like for example, like you look at the closeness testing, right? P and Q. If we have 0 samples from P, then we can't really see anything. So like in that, like this k to the 2 by 3 by epsilon to the 4 by 3 is like necessary for both. That's where it is coming from. Yeah, exactly. So I mean, like we basically achieve that phase, what I told you. That phase gets achieved here. We need at least k to the 2 by 3 by epsilon to the 4 by 3 in order for the closeness tester to actually work. That up to log factor, that's right. I mean, that log factor is coming from this log of square 1 over epsilon. When we use the Levin strategy, we had this L square. That is where the log is mainly coming. Yeah. Yeah. No, it doesn't work for large epsilon, I guess. Right? When epsilon is reasonably large, then these three cases will collapse to the first graph. I mean, like, so like these three things, yeah, that's a good question. Like these three things will collapse. Collapse to k to the 2 by 3 by epsilon to the 4 by 3. I mean, that like we can check it like yeah. And epsilon is less than k to the 1 by 4, I guess. Why? It collapses because epsilon is so small that this k doesn't even matter. I mean, like, because like when you look at it, when you look at the closeness tester, it's summation, right? It's max of two things, and one of them will dominate. I think that it will be root k by epsilon square, because root k by epsilon square is like higher than this one, and it's higher than this one also, because k is basically like dummy. You can think of it that way. Think of k as 1, right? Then this will dominate 1 over epsilon square. This is the max of this comma this would be root k over epsilon square. Correct. Correct. If we assume that k is reasonably large, then correct. Yeah. Correct. Exactly. And also this difference between k and root k also will not be much. If k is 1, for example, k and root k are the same. Something like that. Yeah, k to the 1 by 4 minus 1 by 4. Epsilon has to be greater than that. Yeah, I mean, like, I'm not sure because you need like some kind of an assumption there, right? Because you can't really like point out something there. If it's like, for example, in the real field, then like unbounded support, I'm not sure. It's a good question. Sure, could be possible. But yet, sorry. That is right. Yeah, but like, yeah, this is it takes time. I mean, it requires a lot more to be done even before that, I believe.
mean like this is not be extendable to larger.
Yes, because like there are so many things. For example, here the unobservable is unobservable, right? But sometimes you will have a different variable which are observables, but they are confounding. So like here we are only looking at the direct effect, but yeah,
That like if you was observed, that we also captured.
correct. But then like you need to like this we are looking at direct effect on the direct effect here, but there will be multiple parents and how do you like deal with them? Yeah, you don't know what is that other variable. You need to like it's not efficient also. Like it, yeah. There is PC algorithm, so we can yeah do the same there, but still we need to solve for the other graph, for example. Fourth graph I mentioned, combination of two of these. I believe like solving all those things will help for the to deal with that. For trees, this work though. You're right. Thank you very much, everyone.